This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Change of heart. Good afternoon. Welcome aboard. After first promising a no vote, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer now says he will support that GOP funding bill to avert a government shutdown. The deadline is midnight tonight. Schumer says there are no winners in a government shutdown.
For Donald Trump, a shutdown would be a gift. It would be the best distraction he could ask for from his awful agenda.
Madeline Rivera at Fox News.
A lot of Democrats are angry about Schumer's decision to support the GOP funding bill, but Democrats were stuck between a rock and a hard place, and there was genuine fear that a shutdown could permanently put the federal government at risk or trigger more layoffs.
Kristen Welker moderates the NBC Meet the Press program.
Democrats do not yet know what their strategy or messaging is for taking on President Trump in this moment.
Senate Republicans still need the support of a handful of Democrats to get the short-term spending fix across the finish line. It is likely they will get that before tonight's deadline. Law and order. President Trump gives a speech this afternoon at the U.S. Justice Department. Attorney General Pam Bondi.
His directive was make America safe again. That's what we're going to do. No more weaponization. We're going to go back to fighting basic crime.
Retired FBI agent Thomas Baker.
He's going to lay out his plan to restore law and order to the United States, and he's going to be very clear-cut, and it's a very appropriate visit for him to make at this time.
The president today will talk about efforts to end the weaponization of the Justice Department. That speech is set for around 3 p.m. Russian ruler Vladimir Putin says he agrees in principle with the tenets of a 30-day ceasefire with Ukraine, but he's got serious questions for President Trump and adds the two need to talk soon. Russian affairs expert Rebecca Koffler.
It is my assessment that Putin is not going to accept the peace deal.
Retired four-star Army General Jack Keane is a bit more optimistic.
We got a lot of detailed work here to do, but the door has been open. And that is the significant step forward.
Former U.S. Defense Special Envoy Jeffrey Price expects Putin to drive a hard bargain.
I hope we are not going to be pressed on the timing. I think that Putin suspects that Trump wants a deal soon, and that might give him leverage.
Putin wants sanctions relief in exchange for that peace deal and control of the 4 regions of Ukraine he took when he invaded that country on February 24th. 2022. Hamas has agreed to release the last remaining American hostage in Gaza. 21-year-old Adon Alexander will be let go, along with the bodies of 4 other hostages. Alexander was born in Israel, but he lived most of his life in New Jersey. He's a member of an elite special fighting force known as the Golani Brigade. Vice President J.D. Vance says the Trump administration is moving full steam ahead with its tough tariff policy.
We have a $1 trillion trade deficit. We absorb terrible economic policies from all over the world, and the world expects American consumers to foot the bill for their workers and their businesses, and Donald Trump is flipping that on its head.
But at what cost? Recession fears are growing as the Trump administration doubles down on its tough trade talk. An American Airlines jet caught fire on the tarmac last night at Denver International Airport. It happened moments after an emergency landing. This passenger describing the scene.
The plastic of the window was melting and bubbling, and people were screaming.
Passengers had to evacuate down the aircraft's emergency slide.
Orderly, orderly! That airplane inferno sent passengers running through blinding smoke at Denver's airport.
I look out the window and there's flames.
Ingrid Hibbets and her family were on board American Airlines Flight 1006 as says the cabin filled with smoke.
I'm really grateful that this happened on the ground, because if this happened in the air, I don't think I'd be standing here telling you the story.
The flames erupted below the engine of the Boeing 737 after it diverted to Denver. The FAA says the crew reported engine vibrations after taking off from Colorado Springs en route to Dallas with 178 on board.
CBS's Chris Van Cleve says 12 of those 178 souls aboard suffered minor injuries. Columbia University in New York City is finally suspending students who took over that Ivy League school during Gaza war protests last spring. The action comes after the Trump administration yanked $400 million in federal funding. Protesters denouncing the planned deportation of former Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil descended on Trump Tower Thursday.
A protest group of about 150 entered Trump Plaza supporting Palestine, and we ended up making 98 arrests.
The NYPD's John Chell. President Trump's dusting off an old wartime law to help with the administration's plans to deport dangerous illegal immigrants.
President Trump is preparing to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to fast-track the deportation of suspected members of the Tren de Aragua prison gang.
CBS's Christian Galvez. NASA will try again tonight to launch a rescue mission to retrieve two stranded astronauts aboard the International Space Station. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams have been stuck up there since last June. If all goes according to plan, they should return to Earth sometime next week. Dollar General is warning today the financial situation of low-income Americans is getting worse.
The retail chain has more than 20,000 stores, primarily in rural areas, and its core customers earn under $40,000 a year. CEO Todd Vasos said on an earnings call that many of Dollar General's customers report they only have enough money for basic essentials. Some even have to forgo basic necessities. This after inflation finally cooled in February for the first time in 5 months, but other costs like housing and health care remain expensive. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Still to come on the Noon Report. For a Friday, budget talks heating up in Albany, gearing up for March Madness, and what you need to know about an upcoming burn ban.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. A fine Friday underway in much of the area. The weekend weather news, though, is mixed. I'll have forecast details coming up.
All right, Kevin, we'll see you in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, let's check the stories making news where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. Just a couple weeks to go before the New York budget deadline, and lawmakers are discussing their spending priorities. Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins says tax relief is a must, given the high cost of living right now in New York.
We are trying to really, again, look at a more longer-term relief in terms of taxes for a broad category of people.
Republican State Senator George Borrello says New York does not have a revenue problem. It has a spending problem, and the $252 billion price tag on this year's budget proves it.
If spending more money made New York more affordable, we should be the most affordable place on earth. But we're not. So we have to continue to recognize the fact that New York is a far more expensive, far more dangerous place to live.
While budget talks continue in Albany, Governor Hochul met this morning at the White House with President Trump. Those two discussed a pipeline project through the Empire State and congestion pricing in New York City. Education activists in Pennsylvania are chiming in on Attorney General Dave Sunday's decision not to join a 20-state lawsuit against the Trump White House over efforts to dismantle the U.S. Education Department.
I'm extremely concerned. What it means is that the biggest cop is no longer on the beat effectively.
That's Dan Ackelsberg, president of the Public Interest Law Center.
Public education is not a partisan issue. It is supported by people of all stripes in all corners of the Commonwealth, rural, urban, and suburban.
Attorney General Sunday says he will not micromanage the federal government, but he will do all he can to ensure PA schools are not hurt by the executive action. Two Pennsylvania school districts are suing the Shapiro administration for changing the definition of gender in the Keystone State.
These regulations expand it to be almost an infinite number of types of genders, and it's just really disturbing destroying the fabric of our society.
Attorney Thomas King says schools in Butler and Beaver counties took legal action in order to protect privacy rights of girls in female bathrooms and locker rooms.
They've really just crossed the line when a government agency decides that they're going to take it upon themselves to redefine sex.
President Trump issued an executive order soon after taking office that declared there to be just two genders, male and female. New York leads the nation when it comes to out-migration. A new study from Cornell University shows over the next 25 years, the state's population could drop by more than 2 million people.
What's alarming about that is as people leave, you have a declining tax base. You have the inability to have the same amount of influence you had in Washington prior. I'm just worried that you're going to have a declining standard of living because you have a state that's essentially in decline.
Justin Wilcox with Upstate United tells Spectrum News that housing costs, business regulations, and an oppressive tax rate are just a few of the reasons why so many are leaving New York. Dozens attended a ceremony last night in Lancaster, New York, to remember a 7-year-old boy who was tragically killed in a car crash this week. That event was to honor Noah Whitmore. He was a passenger in a vehicle that drove off the road and crashed into a tree on Tuesday. Noah's mom and grandpa spoke to WGRZ.
I'm just taking it one step at a time. You know, I know that the emotions are going to be there. I'm trying to stay level-headed until everything's are settled down and, you know.
But to see everybody here, people coming up to me, hugging me in tears, where I'm kind of done crying. And to have all these people here showing all this love, they're basically taking that burden off of my shoulder.
The Whitmore family plans to build a playground or garden in a space that the Lancaster community can enjoy in Noah's honor. Doge cuts in Buffalo having a profound impact on the Queen City. Here's Family Life's Dee Haley.
The Department of Governmental Efficiency, also known as DOGE, has shut down 5 federal government offices in Buffalo, including 2 in the city's most valuable office building. The 2 largest offices are located on Elmwood Avenue in an 8-story, 274,000 square foot office building that was constructed in 2004. According to Buffalo Business First, the office building at 130 South Elmwood Avenue is facing significant changes due to government restructuring. Dee Haley, Family Life News.
A statewide outdoor burn ban takes effect Sunday in New York. That ban will last through the middle part of May. It's because of the increased risk for brush fires this time of year.
The big thing this time of year, people think that it's wet, so they should be able to burn, but the grass that's out there and the leaves or any other debris will burn very quick because it's dry.
Dave Saltzman's the fire chief for Big Flats, New York in the southern tier. He says contained campfires are allowed during a burn ban, but not much else is.
Agricultural, there are some things that you can burn agriculturally, but it has to be vegetation.
Aside from the statewide burn ban, Steuben County's under a state of emergency through this coming Monday due to the potential risk for wildfires. They say you can't fight City Hall, but apparently you can fix it up. That's what they've been doing the past 14 months now at Scranton City Hall. A $5 million renovation project will wrap up soon there. Roofer Steve Yanisco tells WNEP it's quite a view from atop of City Hall.
It's high. Not necessarily the main roof, but when you're up on top of the bell tower, you could see everything in the city.
Scranton Mayor Paige Cognetti.
We are so proud to have so many local artisans and workers that have been doing this work, from the stained glass to the roofers, the sheet metal workers, the masons that have been doing the repointing of the entire building.
Fixing up City Hall's Scranton Signature Bell Tower was lit up this past weekend for the first time since the 1980s. It was bathed in green for St. Patrick's Day, which we all will celebrate on Monday. Sports news is next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report. The madness has already begun in men's college basketball. Last night in second-round action of the SEC tournament, Otega Oweh did it again for the Kentucky Wildcats.
He's going, he drives, he puts it out, and in with a half second to go. Oweh did it again to Oklahoma. A walk-off shot from Otega Oweh, and Kentucky will win
Wildcats advance in the SEC tournament. It's the second time this season that Otega Oweh has beaten his former team, Oklahoma, on a last-second shot. Other top 25 action last night, Duke advancing in the ACC tournament with an 8-point win over Georgia Tech. St. John's moving on in the Big East. The Red Storm crushed Butler 78-57, and one upset last night. Texas takes down 16th-ranked Texas A&M in 2 overtimes. Can't wait for the March Madness. This weekend is Selection Sunday. Another milestone for NBA star Steph Curry.
Curry thought about three. He'll put up a three. There it is! Number 4,000! A shot for the ages from a player for the ages.
Kevin Harlan with that call on TNT as Curry becomes the first NBA player to make 4,000 three-pointers. How about that? Curry turns 37 today. His Warriors beat Sacramento last night. Christopher Bell will push his luck this Sunday when the NASCAR Cup Series rolls into Vegas for the Pennzoil 400. The driver of the number 20 car is coming off his 3rd straight win. Jimmy Johnson was the last NASCAR racer to win 4 in a row. That happened back in 2007. At the Family Life Sports Desk, I'm Bob Price. And still to come on the Noon Report for a Friday, Kev says warm and sometimes wet this weekend. Why is Planned Parenthood so interested in local school board elections? And at the end of the broadcast, we celebrate pie. No, not that pie, the other kind.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. In 1787, British abolitionist Thomas Clarkson enlisted a young parliamentarian into his cause. William Wilberforce had converted to Christ just 3 years earlier and had become friends with John Newton, a former slave trader, now pastor and abolitionist. Convinced of the evils of slavery, Wilberforce agreed to fight it in Parliament. Illness kept him from introducing anti-slavery bills until 1789. Unsurprisingly, when he did, his opponents put up procedural hurdles which prevented the vote. Wilberforce persisted year after year, continuing to reintroduce bills to abolish the slave trade. He and a network of other abolitionists also launched a massive campaign to build public support for the cause, and in the process, pioneered almost every tactic that's still used in campaigns today, like boycotts, posters, slogans, petitions, even cameos, which are the 18th century equivalent of bumper stickers. In 1796, after 6 years of failure, it looked as if Wilberforce and his allies could have the votes to pass the bill, but it came up short, 74-70. What happened was his opponents bought tickets for a comic opera and gave them to lukewarm supporters of the bill so that they were not present for the vote. So Wilberforce faced both dirty tricks by the opposition as well as so-called supporters who chose a show over human lives. It must have been both infuriating and demoralizing. In response, Wilberforce reintroduced the bill again the following year, and it failed. And again, he introduced it the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. It failed every time. In March of 1807, nearly 2 decades after first introducing his bill to end the slave trade, it finally passed. The vote was 283-16. The movement then turned to the abolition of slavery itself. That battle took another 26 years. By that time, the abolitionist forces were no longer led by William Wilberforce in Parliament. He was forced to leave due to a significant decline in health. In fact, Wilberforce was on his deathbed when the bill abolishing slavery was finally passed. He received the news just 3 days before he died. God graciously allowed him to see success in this cause to which he had dedicated so much of his life. Success that he did not see after more than a decade of faithfulness to that cause. Now, we'd likely join a fight if we knew eventually that we'd be successful, but we don't know. Neither did Wilberforce. Thus, this whole thing is about faithfulness, not success. Life is best lived in a long obedience to Christ. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint. Today's Breakpoint was co-authored by Dr. Glenn Sunshine. For more resources to live like a Christian today, go to breakpoint.org.
Thank Thank you, John. Outside we go. Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast. Our call for this afternoon, a fair amount of sunshine for most and high temperatures in the 60s. A few spots will nudge 70. So it'll be much cooler near the shores of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario. For tonight, patchy clouds, mild, low in the 40s. Tomorrow, some sunshine, a couple of showers in the afternoon, mainly western New York and northwest Pennsylvania. Breezy with high temps well in the 60s. Saturday, breezy, showers and rumbles. Saturday night into Sunday, high temperatures Sunday mostly in the 60s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. It is Friday, folks. Congratulations, you made it. The 14th of March, and this is the Noon Report. Welcome back to another edition of Capital Connection. Fridays during the Noon Report, we give you direct connection to all that's happening in Albany and Harrisburg with the experts on the issues at the state capitals. This week, flying solo is Michael Geer at the Pennsylvania Family Institute. Jason McGuire, New York Families, busy getting ready for next week's big Legislative Day event in Albany. So we're going to give him a pass this week, Michael, but there is much to discuss in your state. Lots of education and election issues in the news. I want to begin with Planned Parenthood's plans to infiltrate school board elections this year. This is the year those school boards are seated in the Commonwealth. What most concerns you about the strategy here at Planned Parenthood?
Well, Bob, there's an old joke that asks this question: why do people rob banks? And the answer is because that's where the money is. And if folks wonder why Planned Parenthood is supporting candidates at school board races across Pennsylvania, it's because that's where the children are. Planned Parenthood not only commits more abortions in Pennsylvania and nationally than anyone else, it's also the prime promoter of explicit and perverse sex education curriculum and ideology, including transgenderism, in schools, online, and in social media. So in the view of Planned Parenthood, gaining friends and allies on local school boards means that they will have influence with the gatekeepers of what happens in the classroom and in school assemblies, counseling sessions, or when they establish these so-called school-based health clinics where they promote their abortion and their sex ed curriculum. They want to, again, get their tentacles into our public schools because that's where the children are.
Yeah. Talking education, the big news this week with the Trump administration really taking a sledgehammer to the Department of Education, reducing the number of workers there. The goal is to abolish it altogether. I wonder what you think of that and how that would maybe change the dynamics of education in Pennsylvania. Would it much at all?
Well, I was around when Jimmy Carter proposed and made a deal with the teachers union to establish the Federal Department of Education. His successor, Ronald Reagan, campaigned and then said he was going to eliminate the Department of Education. And here we are, decades and decades later with a ballooning budget at the federal level for the Department of Education, and yet we've seen educational achievement just continue to decline. So the money should be going in the states, not sent down to Washington, number one. Number two, the decisions should be made locally and at the state level. And so I think the shutting down the Department of Education will be a positive thing for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for New York, and for states across the country.
Yeah, well, something's got to be done. The test scores are showing that no country in the world spends more per student than this country, and we are right at the bottom when it comes to academic achievement. So we got to do something, that's for sure.
In 1979, America was number one in the world in math education and achievement among students, and that was around the time that the Department of Education got underway, and now we're way down on that list, and so the department has not improved things, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's a civil rights division within U.S. education that has sent a letter to 60 colleges and universities all over America. Many of these universities are right in our listening area. I think of SUNY Binghamton, I think of Cornell, Lehigh Valley, Temple, sowing the seeds of anti-Semitism, or so they've been accused. They are being told to knock it off or you're going to lose federal aid. Do you support this effort at the federal level by the Trump administration?
Yeah, I do. I heard House Speaker Mike Johnson respond to a very similar question, and he and I both think it's appropriate action given the protests that have threatened the physical safety and even even the lives of Jewish college students at places especially notable, Columbia, and here in Pennsylvania, you mentioned some of the places, the University of Pennsylvania being among them as well. Speaker Johnson went last year to Columbia to confront the protesters and see the protesters firsthand, and saw the fearsome and ferocious throngs that were threatening the Jewish students, some of whom ended up, even though they had paid for their tuition, they ended up leaving campus and the school for their own safety and well-being. Speaker Johnson was a one-time attorney for the Alliance Defending Freedom and a fierce advocate for free speech, but he said that these actions go well beyond free speech because of the threats to life and limb.
Let's move on, Michael. There was a big court case this week that made news out of Colorado. The U.S. Supreme Court says it will hear this case on so-called gay conversion therapy. This is an issue that's been in the news a lot. There are 28 states, I couldn't believe it, 28 states that ban this kind of therapy. Now, a lot of Christian counselors will argue that faith is a powerful tool in helping people overcome homosexual tendencies. Do these Christian counselors have a point, and how do you think the court might rule here?
Well, I'm glad that the court has decided to hear the case. You know, it involves Christian counselor Kaylee Childs, who brought this case, and she's being defended by the Alliance Defending Freedom. It's an important case because even, states like Pennsylvania that don't have a law like that still have regulations that the Shapiro administration has put into place that restrict the ability of counselors to help people who legitimately come and want help to avoid whether it's same-sex attraction or they may have gender dysphoria and things. And right now, the policy of so many states, because of these laws like Colorado's or even the regulations in Pennsylvania, basically create a situation where the counselors can't help those people. And what these states seem to be pushing is if you come to a counselor and say, I have gender dysphoria, I think maybe I'm a boy in a girl's body or whatever, their only response to you is to push you in that direction and not provide counseling that says, you know what, let me help you and figure out what's going on in your head that's making you think this way. And so instead of doing counseling, they end up doing like what happened to Chloe Cole, now a detransition or a double mastectomy when she was age 15. That's the push, and the Supreme Court is, I think, hopefully going to see this case result in fairness so that people who seek help for these situations have the option of getting the help they really want and need. That'll be a big ruling. I expect that sometime in June. I want to spend the last couple of minutes we have, Michael, just talking about some election stuff in the news in Harrisburg. The Commonwealth will be spending $10 million to replace their online voter registration database. I wonder if this is a case of if it's not broke, don't fix it, or was there something that really needed upgraded there when it comes to this database? I think there's awareness well beyond the borders of Pennsylvania that the election system here in our state has not been performing well, with slow counts and questions about integrity and glitchy reporting. And the system that's being talked about for this new contract not only includes voter registration, but how quickly results are tallied and communicated, access online, etc. The current online system here in Pennsylvania has been in use since the early 2000s, which in the private sector is kind of an eon of time, but in government it's just barely broken in. The question is, though, Bob, will this new contract and the millions of dollars committed to it result in something better? The Wolf administration signed a similar contract when Wolf was in office, and that ended up failing and nothing resulted from it. So I was thinking maybe the Doge team could spend a little spare time, come up to Pennsylvania, see if they can help out. And again, I know that Doug Mastriano, State Senator Mastriano, said, hey, he wants a Doge like something at the state level because they could uncover a lot of waste and abuse and probably a little fraud as well. While we're talking elections, I know you're a big fan of voter ID. The House Democrats say they are open to expanding that so long as Republicans show an interest in other sorts of election reforms. Is this a deal or a trade-off that Republicans should entertain, Michael? Well, I think risky would be a good way to approach this. The fact is we've seen agreements come from our state legislature with Republicans and Democrats for election reform. Notable was the agreement back in 2019 to allow for mail-in voting in exchange for eliminating the option with a single checkbox of straight party voting. And as people who look back on it now would say that didn't work out so well. So we had voter ID actually did pass and was signed into law by Governor Corbett, but the court struck it down. And so I would be fearful at this stage in striking among some deal that included other parts of a package, that then the not so good parts would be upheld, but then voter ID would again be struck down. So who knows? It's still something we need to have happen in Pennsylvania, but I don't know whether a deal is the way to get it.
All right. Well, that'll have to be the last word this week. Lots of issues discussed today, but I'm sure a few of our listeners would like to know more about what they heard on the program, or maybe they just want to know what is the Pennsylvania Family Institute anyway. Why do you exist, Michael? You have existed for 36 years there, doing a great work in Harrisburg. If folks want to learn more, where can they find you online?
We are at pafamily.org.
Thank you very much, Michael. Capital Connection comes your way every Friday during the Noon Report, and we promise we'll have Jason back next week there at New York Families. You can subscribe, listen to, and share this feature, as well as all our original podcasts at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Most of the area enjoying a fine Friday afternoon. As we head into the weekend with mixed weather news, we'll carry the mild, pleasant weather into the start of the weekend, but a potent cold front will arrive with showers and rumbles as we progress through the second half of the weekend, and then it turns quite a bit chillier by the start of the work week. Our call for this afternoon, though nice, fair amount of sunshine for most and high temperatures in the 60s. A few spots will nudge 70, though it'll be much cooler near the shores of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario. For tonight, patchy clouds, mild, low in the 40s. Tomorrow, some sunshine, a couple of showers in the afternoon, mainly western New York and northwest Pennsylvania. Breezy with high temps well in the 60s. Cloudy, breezy, showers and rumbles Saturday night into Sunday. High temperatures Sunday mostly in the 60s.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Finally at noon for a Friday for all you math geeks. And you know who you are. We celebrate pi. P-I, pi. Family Life's Brian Query.
Today is March 14th, which can mean only one thing. It's Pi Day. Pi Day is observed on March 14th since 3, 1, and 4 are the first three significant figures of the mathematical constant pi. The value of pi was first calculated thousands of years ago, and Pi Day began around 35 years ago when physicist Larry Shaw gave his entire staff fruit pies and tea on 3/14 at 1:59 p.m., representing the first 5 digits after the decimal. In case you're wondering, the record for most memorized decimal places of pi is over 70,000. So today, celebrate by calculating some impressive math problem or eating a slice of your favorite pie. Brian Query, Family Life News.
I think I'll do the other thing there. Eating the pie works a lot better for me. Thank you very much, Brian. And that's our world. The world we live in. Friday, Pi Day, March 14th. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.